Great to see Coach Jim Lowe out there. I spotted Coach Jim Lowe, and he was here for many years. It's good to see you, Coach. Also, I'd like to mention, special mention, two of the players I coached that have been introduced. And, Eric Coulter and Trent England, not only were they great players, but they were great leaders, great young men. And, I'm so proud of them today. I mean, they're great men now and great fathers, so it's such a pleasure to see them tonight. Somehow I feel like I'm getting ready to introduce Gary Wirsch, and somehow I feel like I can just pass around the mic, because I think everybody in here would be able to say something about Gary. But, Gary texted me the other day, and he said, "Pass my physical, ready for year 43. And, for a split second, I wanted to think like 43 years of age, like we're 43 years old. But that was a split second. Then I realized what he's really saying, he was ready for his 43rd year of driving a school bus for Little Miami. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm sure if you lived in this district, you may have had Gary as your school bus driver. Well, wait a minute, maybe your parents may have had Gary as your school bus driver. But whether it was your students or it was you or your parents, I just think how fortunate you would have been if Gary was your bus driver. I don't know how many times I heard over the years people coming up to Gary just saying how glad they were that they were their kid's bus driver. Besides driving a bus, when I first came here, I mentioned to Gary about helping me coach. And that first year, he had a relative playing at Claremont Northeastern, so he wasn't able to do so. But the second year, he started showing up, and so we gave him a duty, and we hired him on as a volunteer assistant basketball coach. Now, little did we know at that time that he would hold that position for 21 years. And a lot of people say to me, what made Gary such a great assistant coach? Well, Gary was very passionate. I've heard Bleed Green and Gold tonight. He was very passionate about his school. He was a 1972 graduated with Kippy Thomas. But he was very passionate about his school. He was very passionate about coaching. He's very passionate about kids. He cared about kids. He's a great communicator, just a great communicator. He built relationships with kids. I was trying to think of many images or game faces over the years. And of course, there's thousands that come to mind, so I was just trying to pick out a few. And, one of the first things I think of is kids coming off from the game, and Gary, one of the first coaches up, to give them a high five, to sit down with them, to talk with them, to give them advice, maybe what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong. Also thinking practices. Maybe kids would come in and they wouldn't give their all. And that's one thing that got under Gary's skin. If you weren't there to give your all, you would feel Gary's wrath. And I can guarantee you did not want to do that. But I guarantee you anybody that did will say today that they deserved it. And also, I think of Gary after games, after practices. I don't know how many times over those years that I would see him sitting in the hallway. He would be sitting in the bleachers for hours talking to kids, giving kids encouragement, or maybe just lending an ear to the kids. He was such a great at that, at building relationships with kids. I also remember Gary one time at UC camp. We loved going to UC camp. And he's already laughing. But I remember Gary one time, he was just chatting away up there with a couple of coaches, and he didn't realize he walked over and he was kind of standing under the basket, and a ball come flying through, bounced up, hit him up in the face, knocked his glasses off, about knocked him down. And I just remember all the players, looking at all the players, and they're like ready to burst out laughing, but they're wanting to make sure that he's okay first. Once they found out he was able to compose himself, then they were rolling on the floor. But Gary got along great with players. I also remember Gary sitting in my office. We spent many hours there. I remember tears coming down Gary's cheeks. Maybe we tried to help a player, but maybe unsuccessful in doing so. But, Gary coached with his heart. He had a big heart. Besides coaching, Gary was also site manager / assistant AD for 24 years. He took a supplemental position doing that. And it got me to thinking, if you lived in this district and on your way to work in the morning, you might see Gary picking up the kids, taking them to school. Maybe at lunchtime, you ran out to get something to eat. There's Gary dropping off the kindergarten kids at lunchtime. Maybe on your way home at 4:30, there's Gary dropping off the elementary students from school. So you go home and you have dinner, you say, I think I'll go up and catch a basketball game tonight. Well, there's Gary on the bench coaching basketball. So maybe it's a fall season and it's a Saturday morning, and you say, I'll go catch a freshman JV football game. You go up there and there's Gary running the game as a site manager, freshman JV football game. So then you say, Tuesday, I'm going to catch a soccer game, but it's over at King, so, I know I won't see Gary over there. Well, you go over there, there's Gary sitting in the bleachers, watching his soccer game, and you say, Gary, what are you doing over here at the soccer game? He goes, one of the soccer kids rides my bus. He's been real excited about soccer, and he's been wanting me to come and watch him play. That's who Gary is. He would make the time to go do that. Then you would say, maybe during basketball season, Little Miami's not playing tonight, so I'll go watch maybe Kings playing Mason. Won't see Gary there, right? Nope, there's Gary in the stands. He's scouting. Little Miami's getting ready to play one of those two teams in the next 2 weeks. So Gary's kind of everywhere. And speaking of that, with scouting, he was such an avid scouter. I don't even know what year he kind of we just turned over the reins to him to be our scouter in several years. And after he coached at Little Miami, he went to Reading and he coached 6 years under Rich. And then when Rich went on to Ohio Northern University, Gary became a recruiter for Ohio Northern University for 10 years. And, Gary was at a lot of those games recruiting for Ohio Northern, but the funny part to me was, Gary would go to those games maybe just concentrating and focusing on one player that maybe he's recruiting. But I guarantee you, and this happened I don't know how many times, if a coach found out Gary was at that game and that coach was getting ready to play one of those two teams, Gary's phone would ring. And they would be saying, hey, can you give me a scouting report on Mason, or can you give me a scouting report on Kings? That is how well Gary was respected by all the coaches, and that happened hundreds of times. Gary might have been focused on one, but they respected him well enough to know that he would give them a great scouting report on either one. Gary and I first met in high school, and we became friends in high school, and we attended a few Reds games together. Even a Cincinnati Royals game shows our age. And I think with Gary, I was just thinking the other day that if Gary, I think I can say this being his friend, if Gary asked you to go out to eat, or maybe go to some event, and he says, hey, why don't you come out here, it's only going to be an hour, I can guarantee you better double it, it's probably be 2. If he says 2, it's probably going to be 4. Because I guarantee you, wherever you go, I don't care, new restaurant just opened down in Cincinnati somewhere, back in alley. You go with him, you're sitting there eating, and all of a sudden you will hear, hey, Gary! And then proceed to come over and talk for a minute or 2. Okay? That is Gary. And he has friends. Gary has friends everywhere. Friends everywhere. And he's got more friends than anyone I know. And I think we know why that is. What you see is what you get. He's a very genuine person, very loyal to his friends. And, I can't think of anyone more deserving of this honor than Gary. And I know 2 people up here are smiling right now, Gary. And I know it's your mom and dad. And they're beaming with pride. So at this time, I would like to introduce the greatest assistant coach in Ohio, my friend, actually my family, Gary Wirsch.
Good evening. Thanks for coming to work, Robert. This may come as a shock, but I'm really not planning on telling my stories tonight. So some of you guys in the back can probably relax a little bit. First of all, thanks for everybody for coming out. Excuse me. I want to start by thanking the selection committee for this honor. It's big. I want to thank all the teachers, coaches, administration I've worked with over the years in athletics. Everybody here in Miami's always had my back. It's just been a great, enjoyable experience. I want to thank Matt Lewis and the athletic department for putting all this together. This has been great. I also want to offer a special thanks to two people. Number one is Coach Carl, who's here tonight. We probably haven't seen each other for 50 years or so or whatever, but he was a great mentor to me in high school, and it's just great having him here tonight. The second is Melinda Briggs. Stand up, please. Where are you at? Melinda, stand up. We don't have a Hall of Fame without Melinda Briggs, so give her a round of applause. A lot of people to thank. I want to thank my fellow inductees, Jim Neese and his family, 1984 softball team. That was good stuff back then. Barry, Josh, guys, fun times, believe me, really good stuff. Trent Ingram. Trent was always fun to coach. I think Trent rode my bus, like we said, since he was 5 years old or whatever. Our running joke tonight was we discussed that when he was 5, that we'd both be going in the Hall of Fame the same night. So it's kind of been our running joke tonight. Don't know I had the road he lived on, I had for 25 years driving a bus. So, I went by there a lot, even on elementary or whatever, dropping the sister off, whatever. I don't know if I ever seen anybody put up more shots driving down that road than Trent did. I mean, he had a basket out there and Trent was shooting. There's a reason why he's where he's at. He put the time in and did a great job with it. So, and then come to Kevin, who I've known since he was a kid, and I mean, probably wasn't a board in the house that he didn't dribble a basketball off growing up or whatever, and he just turned into one of the best ever played here, and just a beast from that standpoint. You got Eric, who met Eric when he started coming to basketball camp about 4th grade, 5th grade, something like that. I didn't know Kevin had all the headbands and sweatbands when he started coming to camp, so that might have been a family trait, I'm not sure. So I remember those days, and but the good thing about E is he grew into the player who led us to our first FAVC championship, and is now one of the best coaches in Southwest Ohio. So, and now I come to Kip. Kip and I were classmates. We were always friends. We didn't necessarily always run the same circles, but we always got along. We're always friends, and Kip was just a guy that was way ahead of the time. From a quarterback standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, Rob and I have talked about it before. He always seemed like he was 3 or 4 years ahead of the rest of us. I mean, he was just that type of guy. I mean, just so competitive or whatever, and he's definitely he was definitely the best all-around athlete in the 70s, and maybe of all time coming out here. He was just great. So he's just dearly missed. He will love this tonight without question. Family, from my late parents to my aunts, uncles, cousins, they all played a big part in this. it's probably where I got my competitiveness, love for sports. That's where it all started. So I thank them very much for being here. A lot of friends have been supportive over the years or whatever. You know, it's big for me tonight to see a few people in the crowd here that, you know, that were great athletes here that necessarily maybe didn't have a connection tonight, but they still showed up on my behalf. So, you know, thanks so much for showing up. That really means a lot. You know, most people are lucky to have just one good family. You know, as Coach Shorts talked about, you know, I've had two. The second one's the basketball family here in Little Miami. And with that, you know, I'd like to thank the guys I coached with over the years here, starting with the late Mark Lapelli, who I think should be in here pretty soon in the Hall of Fame. Jim Prue, Mark Short, Pete Hopewell, Mark Eagle. These guys are always, and still are, like brothers to me. We had a lot of fun, a lot of great memories together, so, you know, I thank them a lot. We always get along great. Next, what it's really all about is the players. You know, I think that's really why you get into coaching, is because, like Rob was talking about, with relationships. That was very important, and, you know, it's, you know, I just want to thank them for always being coachable and, you know, for the dear friendships I have with so many of them today, or whatever. You know, it's just continued over the years, and hardly a day goes by and I'm not talking to one of them about one thing or another. I mean, they've just, you know, so many of them have become a big part of my life. So you know, it's always good. You know, you always have some that you're still explaining to one of them once in a while why they got kicked, why the team got kicked out of the gym because of them. But you know, that's, you know, that'll probably be addressed in a couple of years or so when they go into the Hall of Fame. But anyway, so thanks so much to all my former players. I mean, you guys mean everything. But then we get to Rob. Well, bottom line is I wouldn't be here without him. I said I wasn't going to tell too many stories, but I have to tell this one. Back in summer 1980, he was teaching and coaching up at Greenfield, and I was working in our campground, and I was playing on softball, and I didn't have any insurance, so I needed to get a job where I had insurance. My dad drove a school bus, and so I went through all the certification to start driving. And so Rob was in the campground. We hadn't, and you know, of course, obviously 1980 didn't have cell phones, so it was kind of hard to stay in touch. So he whips in the campground and he gets out of the car and he goes, guess what? He goes, I'm going to be the new varsity basketball coach in Miami. And I said, well, guess what? I'm starting the year driving a school bus. And we looked at each other and we just started laughing. It was like something out of Welcome Back, Kotter or something, you know? I mean, we're just cracking up. So, you know, so I mean, you know, you're thinking, well, man, this might last a couple, 3 years or something or other. You don't really know. And you know, we're like 25 years old. And, you know, next thing you know, I mean, you know, it just starts going on from there. Like you said, I had some of my cousins were finishing up their athletic careers over at C&E. So I got to see Kevin play maybe 4 or 5 games that year or whatever. So in the off season, he asked me if I wanted to scout for him the following year. And I'm like, I don't know that much about scouting. He goes, you'll be fine. He says, I'll send you out with one of my assistant coaches. Who's Kenny Williams sitting down here. So I was telling Kenny earlier, and he remembered the story. We were going to Springboro to scout. And so I said, no, okay, let's go. So Kenny goes, yeah, we'll stop and eat at McDonald's, you know, and then we'll go scout. I'm thinking, crap, this ain't bad. Yeah, I might be able to get into this a little bit. You know, it's not bad. So that was kind of my introduction into scouting basketball, and you know, and started helping out at practice and just kind of went from there. And, you know, I guess the fortunate thing is I found my passion in life because of that, you know. Obviously, like Rob said, you know, I think A lot of people think I came with the building, and I probably did to a certain extent. But, you know, it is what it is. Never having any idea that it would last as long as it did, you know, with first bus driving and coaching, then working in the AD office and site manager, you know, a lot of long hours, but, you know, I loved every minute of it. I don't think you do it if you don't. And, these were jobs that, you know, you had to learn. Some of the former guys know too, with Rob, you know, there's a certain standard you had to adhere to, you know, and, sometimes he'd say, "You said what?" Or "You did what?" You know, I mean, you kind of get that, and I think our guys, we've all got that. I mean, he's always big on coaching his coaches, and, I'll just let him know now that maybe there's a time or two I might have fudged on that a little bit, you know, but I got the message, you know. I think I stayed within the parameters pretty well. I learned things always seem to work out. And, as for coaching, 21 years, you know, I'm proud of all of our teams that we had. We always seemed to get better as the year went on. I'm really proud of the 10-year stretch we had between 1988 and 1997, when we won 147 games, 3 FAVC championships in those 10 years. In 1994, we got off to a slow start and come within one game of having 3 in a row. And had a school north of us not recruited 3 Division I players, we might have had 5 in 10 years. But that's the breaks, that's just how it rolls. And in later years, you know, I would wind up coaching, like you said, 6 years at Reading, recruited for Ohio Northern for 10. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, you know, enjoyed the heck out of it, met a lot of great people and everything, but it was never as special as it was here. I think when you coach at the place where you went to school, where you grew up all your life, there's just something special about it, and everything, it's just irreplaceable. So that being said, that's why I'll always be a Panther. Thanks everybody for listening. Appreciate it.